So Israeli forces are now said to be widening their ground offensive in central Gaza at this moment as we speak. The renewed push comes just ahead of a key United Nations Security Council vote to increase aid into the Gaza Strip to avert a potential famine. Hopes are also fading for a new truce deal with literally no breakthrough happening in the talks. Now, the United Arab Emirates was in fact trying to avoid a US veto for its United Nations Security Council resolution draft. The resolution would demand that Israel and Hamas should allow the use of all land, sea and air routes throughout the entire Gaza Strip for humanitarian aid deliveries. After weeks of talks and negotiations, the vote has been delayed and the vote by the Security Council was put off again for Friday. This despite the US saying that it could now support an amended proposal. Now, earlier in the day, the Israeli forces fired tear gas near the Al-Aqsa compound, and this is in the West Bank. This is the place where there is no Hamas whatsoever. The Al-Aqsa compound is the third holiest site in Islam, where the Palestinians, of course, gather for prayers every day. And today, of course, was a big day because it was the occasion of Friday prayers. The people were seen running from the riot police when the tear gas was fired at the crowd of people who in fact gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the occasion of Friday prayers. The mounted police also charged at a group that was trying to run away. In addition to the ground offensive that began on the 20th of October, the Israeli airstrikes and artillery bombardment continued on the Gaza Strip all through the day.
כוחותינו ממשיכים להעמיק את הפעילות הקרקעית בצפון עזה ובדרומה. מאז סיום ההפוגה בפעולה הקרקעית בעזה, כוחותינו חיסלו יותר מ-2,000 מחבלים מהאוויר, מהים ומהיבשה.
Now, talking about the Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip, there is fresh analysis that shows that Israel has dropped hundreds of massive bombs capable of killing and wounding people over 1,000 feet away in the very first month of the war. Satellite imagery from the early days of the war reveals 500 impact craters that are said to be at least about 12 meters in diameter, consistent with those that have been left behind by the 2,000-pound bombs that the Israelis have been using regularly in this campaign. And they've been dropping these 2,000-pound bombs in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods anywhere in the world. For comparison, these bombs are said to be 4 times heavier than the largest bombs that the United States had dropped in Iraq in its war against the ISIS. And experts have blamed the extensive use of very heavy ammunition, such as the 2,000-pound bombs, for the death toll that is now run to tens of thousands in Gaza. Remember, at this moment as we speak, over 20,000 Palestinians have been massacred in this campaign of relentless bombing that Israel has carried out. And nearly about 70% of all those who have been killed are said to be women and children. Israel has flattened swathes of densely populated neighborhoods in Gaza. It has razed down complete neighborhoods to rubble in its campaign of indiscriminate bombing. And Israel says that it is going after Hamas. But looking at the scale of devastation there, lots of questions have been asked as to why Israel has not used precision strikes and has instead resorted to this scale of bombings, where it is the civilians who seem to be paying the ultimate price. The soaring death toll in the Gaza Strip has also drawn international criticism, even from some of the most staunchest allies of Israel, such as the United States. The Israeli military has expressed regret for the civilian deaths, but it has blamed Hamas for operating out of densely populated areas and using civilians as human shields. But even then, questions have been asked as to why Israel has dropped 2,000-pound bombs in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods, like, for instance, in the Jabalia refugee camp. Now, Israel has admitted that about 140 of its soldiers have been ambushed and killed during its ground incursion so far. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is expected to happen at the United Nations later this evening today, which will, of course, be morning in New York, we're being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's joining us live from Brussels. Dr. Doctorow is an international affairs analyst, an author and an historian. Dr. Doctorow, this of course is a crucial moment in the war. The death toll has gone past 20,000 in the Gaza Strip. And what is interesting is that the UNSC is expected to vote on increased humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. But this is a vote that's been delayed 4 times already. Why do you think that is so?
The main question was to change the nature of the resolution that was brought to the UN by the United Arab Emirates, which called originally for a ceasefire. That was totally unacceptable. The United States rejected such a resolution twice, and the wording of what exactly the resolution could provide has been the subject of debate for this delayed period of 3 days that you mentioned. Finally, where we stand, the idea of a ceasefire has been dismissed entirely from the language. We have the question of increased humanitarian assistance. And there the blocking point is, raised by Israel, that they participate in inspecting all the incoming international aid. That is, by the estimation of the United Nations people, by the estimation of the Egyptians, who are whose border with Palestine, with Gaza, is the main transit point for any incoming aid. These agencies in Egypt and the United Nations believe that Israeli participation will vastly slow down any aid transport that's coming in. I was interested to see your mention in your narrative on the status of the war, that there's discussion, or at least there was the hope, that all avenues of transport would be utilized to bring in the aid, including, as you mentioned, sea. Mm-hmm. There is a very topical question, because right now the other big issue in the war is the possible escalation, regionalization of it, with respect to the Houthis' attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. And that is precisely the issue.
Right.
The freedom of the seas.
So I'll come to the issue of the freedom of seas and what is happening at this moment in the Red Sea. But the question that I think a lot of people are baffled about is that there seems to be debate and discussion about increased aid deliveries into the Gaza Strip. There are 2.3 million people who have been denied access to food, water and electricity. Should it even be a matter of debate as to whether they should be sent more aid at a time when they've been living in a blockade for well over 2.5 months now?
If it were a just world, then what you say would obtain. However, we're not living in a just world. We're living in a world that is dominated by force, and Israel is behaving as if it were the United States. Over the last 30 years, the United States has gotten away with murder, literally, in campaigns in a number of countries in West Asia, and Israel believes that it can do the same thing. However, the United States never had a case brought before the International Criminal Court for war crimes, and Israel just has. South Africa has filed the papers, and I believe that is going to be very interesting to follow, to how quickly the court will act and whether it will have any bearing on Israel's further conduct. But that the bombing, the starvation, and the pure obstinacy and violence of Israel's government with respect to Gaza is, you've mentioned it in the lead up to our interview. Mm-hmm. I fully agree with what you've said. And the amazing thing is that even CNN, even BBC, even Euronews, which are generally following the policy lines of the United States, mm-hmm. have been as open as you are in showing to their viewers the tragedy that Israel is wreaking in Gaza.
Because in a world where everyone has access to social media, there's literally nothing that can be hidden, and this is what has happened with the case of the legacy media. But coming to the issue of the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, the Houthis say that they are targeting ships that are bound for Israel. How much of a concern is that going to be for the Israelis? Because according to reports that are now being filed, it now says that nearly 85% of traffic in the Red Sea that was headed towards the port of Eilat in southern Israel has now been affected because of the Houthis firing missiles and drones at ships that are headed towards Israel. Do you think that will have any bearing on this war?
So it already has bearing on the war. It is the question: will this be regionalized or globalized? The effectiveness of the Houthi action has been much greater than you suggest by speaking about the transport heading straight to Israel. The whole of international container shipping has not accepted yet the United States' plan of assured prosperity in a naval force to provide safe passage to commercial shipping. The insurers do not support that. And so the effect on global shipping and the disposition of containers is greatly affected. But I raised the question of the Red Sea and shipping and freedom of the seas because exactly the same issue can be raised with respect to Israel's behavior off the Gaza coast. There is the blockage on Gaza is not only on land routes, it's on sea as well. And this is in violation of international rules of maritime.
I think you've summed it up beautifully there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
My pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.